Excited to speak to Ryen Russillo, the Ryen Russillo Show. Respect the work that he puts out. Ryen, thank you so much for taking some time to join Roundball Roundup on UtahJazz.com.
Yeah, man, let's do it. Let's talk some jazz.
So I want to get into the team, but before, Jazz general manager Justin Zanuck was able to connect you with Adrian Wojnarowski. If you could give a little background to how he led to that meet cute between you two.
Uh, yeah, so I used to go to the Portsmouth Invitational Tournament on my own back when I first got started in Boston. So that was the end of '03, '04. I love the draft. It was always like my favorite thing. It still is my favorite thing on the calendar. And I would religiously read Chad Ford stuff. Like I felt like Chad Ford was speaking this language back in the old ESPN insider days. Like there was a little graphic of him, but like a phone next to his face. So it was those old bright orange pages. And so, there was a shift of college. I kind of like wasn't as obsessed with sports after growing up with it, maybe a little burnt out, and then realizing like after college, I'm like, man, I really care about sports again. So like the draft, I would keep track of stupid stuff that was pointless with these legal pads before I was like bartending, right? And so then I get into the business and then I'm reading about Pavel Podkolzin and Matcha Lampy and just all these guys and being like, they seemed like mythical creatures, mythical beings. And I reached out to Chad. I was super aggressive back then. I just found his number and called him and I was on the air in Boston and he would come on all the time. And he was kind of like an early mentor for me. And so he was like, if you're really into this and then building contacts around the league and all this different stuff that you'd want to do, because I'd be harassing the Boston guys. That was actually like in the gap year of Patino leaving and then Chris Wallace and Leo Papillo, who were terrific to me before Danny came on. But right as I got to Boston, it's kind of like when the new ownership was there and then Danny came on to run everything. But Chad was like, go to Portsmouth. So Portsmouth Invitationals, Portsmouth, Virginia. It's a high school gym. It's a hilarious roster construction where it's local businesses that draft the players. Like I think after a few drinks at a country club. And then the basketball isn't great. There's barely ever any first rounders there. I think it might even be worse now, but it's this traditional thing on the draft timeline. And I met Justin Zanuck at it. And that's when Zanuck was doing the agent thing and a ton of international guys. But it was all kind of coming together where it was like we had no information on any of the international guys. I couldn't watch anything. There was nothing online. I used to ask D1 schools to send me DVDs of players. I remember Syracuse actually asked for the DVD back after I was done one year, which still was very surprising to me. I didn't send it back because it just wasn't good at mailing stuff. And so early on, Zanuck became somebody that was a friend more than he was. We rarely ever talk about the Milwaukee Bucks, or we wouldn't really talk about what's going on with the Utah Jazz. He was just somebody that became way more than a source, and not even a source because I'm not a reporter, but just like, hey, what the hell's going on here? What have you heard there? Like Zanuck seemed to have a real interest in like my life, and so as things got bigger and better for me throughout all the ESPN years, um, Woj comes on the scene, and I don't know Woj at all. Like I only knew Woj as like the guy that kind of hated ESPN.
People
That's what
forget
it
about
seemed
that.
like.
Yeah.
Right. People, that's what it seemed like. And not that I was, there's plenty of stuff when you work at ESPN, there's all these voices. So it doesn't mean like it's actually kind of the opposite of politics. Like just because another guy's on the air at ESPN doesn't mean I'm just going to agree with him all the time about everything that he says. There's a lot of voices, there's a lot of opinions. There's plenty of people that I love to death, and there's plenty of people that I worked with that I was like, I cannot believe that this is what your final conclusion of these things, or this is your opinion on all this different stuff. So um, it wasn't that I was like a prideful ESPN guy being like, this Woj guy better watch his step, but I just didn't really know anything about him other than I was reading him. And then he was just destroying everybody in the insider game. Like, I think
Mm-hmm.
peak Woj is unassailable. I don't think there's ever been an insider in any other sport that can match what his peak years were. And so I asked Zanuck, I was like, what is up? Because I guess the story is that John Skipper, who was then the president of ESPN, finally like pitched to Woj, like, will you come to ESPN? And he's like, I'm sick of seeing you kick our ass and your name on the bottom line every single time there's a new NBA trade or some sort of announcement. And the funniest thing too is that like Woj grew up not that far away from all of this stuff. I think he's in the Bristol Hall of Fame before ESPN. And I'm giving you the full backstory as I do as a podcaster here, but I just like talked to Danik, was like, what's up with this Woj guy? Like, but I just was probably as a masshole, like predetermined to probably not like him. And Zanuck was like, you guys are gonna love each other. He's like, you guys are gonna love each other. And we were at the combine in Chicago, and it was very like kind of standoffish. And not that I'm competing with Woj, like Woj is at such a different level of what I'm doing in the NBA world, but Xanax like, hey, this is Woj, you got to meet Russillo, and we are like, hey, and then it was like auto. It just was, it clicked. And Woj is probably one of my closest friends now, still, but it's all because of Xanax just knowing us as well as he did. That he was like, you guys are actually going to hit it off perfectly, and Woj, that level of friendship. There have been times where it surprises me how much Woj is, in a private way, has hit me up and if it doesn't happen without Zanuck.
Well,
So
it lends itself to what Zanuck does, which is be a connector. Him taking that agent background, jumping to the front office, being the
yeah,
general manager of the Jazz, and having that experience with Milwaukee. Him using that skill to connect you two in that moment.
yeah, I love all of the things that Zanuck is great at. I think he's maybe one of the most comfortable human beings that I've ever run into. That he is. Um, I mean, look, let's just say what it is. Like Ainge is arguably one of the most popular, and Danny is like one of the most popular people in the history of Utah. There's other people in Zanuck's position that would probably find that dynamic to be like challenging, or am I going to get enough credit, or does anyone know? Because like as soon as any of those bigger deals, which Zanuck had a ton to do with, happen, it's like, oh, look at Danny Ainge. Danny Ainge did it again. You have to be an incredibly secure person who is unemotional in a very emotional game, to continue to. I think it just makes up all these things. Like he's successful because of all of his talents, but he's also successful because of the demeanor that he has. And it was a good advanced scouting by Zanuck on both myself and Woj.
When you look at the way that he's gone about this rebuild, alongside Danny Ainge, alongside now Austin Ainge, he's seen two rebuilds here in Utah. When you look back to even the mid 2010s days, how is this rebuild grading out as they're starting to see the end of it with this Jaren Jackson Jr. trade?
Yeah, I don't know that we are ready to give it a grade though, because prior to the Jaren Jackson, and I think you're saying that, right? Yeah, like I don't know that we're going into next year being like, okay, are they a 4 seed, and then how far
Right.
away from a title contender? Because
Exactly.
I actually am going to talk about Danny here because after I'd met like the guys that were keeping the seat warm in Wallace and Papil in Boston for Danny, and then Danny came in. Danny and I had a really good relationship. I used to work out at the Celtic facility in Waltham, and he would be nice enough to invite me up. And, granted, he probably wasn't all that impressed with my basketball acumen at the time, but he would kind of speak to me about like philosophical differences of like building a team, right? And so I remember when they did the Ricky Davis trade, right? And everybody's like, why would they do the Ricky Davis trade? And Ainge is like, this talent, this roster is so bad. Like, I'm just trying to make this roster more talented. And I need to figure out a way to do that, whether it's defining the right draft picks or these incremental trades where maybe I'm taking somebody that's in a situation that's contractually or maybe a little damaged goods. But if this player is a little bit better, like I have to, from the start, I have to make this roster a little bit more talented. And the other thing that he taught me is that we were so obsessed back then, and I've told this story plenty of times. So if listeners of mine or listeners to this pod, they're like, oh, here we go again, this angel lesson. But I want to share with your audience is that we were like obsessed with cap space back in the day, 20 years ago, obsessed with it. And cap space has never been less valuable because now the player just signs, and if he wants out, he's just going to ask out. And everybody can kind of keep their own. Well, I can't say everybody can keep their own players with the new restrictions of the first and second April, but the cap keeps going up so much because business has been so good, and it's happening in football too, that there's just a lot. Like there isn't that handcuffed 7-year max contract where you go, oh my God, did we screw up? And then you have like 5 years to go. So Ainge was always about, hey, I want to know what I'm getting. I don't want to go into free agency in July being like, I hope somebody picks me, and then it's the guy picks the one team, then nine teams hoarding cap space are incredibly disappointed. And then you go to your owner or your fan base, you're like, what happened? All this awesome cap space that we're going to have. It's like, well, now we're signing Brandon Jennings, 50 million bucks. Um, this this deal, and look, Austin is terrific. I've known him obviously less than Danny, but this deal, I think, speaks to that philosophy of, okay, look, we have something here in Keontae. All right. Like there's something here. The ace stuff through this year, I think, is a win. And it was such like this draft pick made a lot of sense. Like before the draft, I was like, I wonder if they just go like, hey, let's take the 6'7" guy, like
The
we'll figure
talent's
it
too
out.
good. Talent's
Right,
too good.
right, right. And you also realize too, like all the guys in front of him look like they're going to be really, really good too. So, maybe he ended up going where he was supposed to. Uh, obviously, like the Kessler part of it, I think the Keontae jump to go from like a smaller guard that's a score first guard that looks a little lost the first couple of years, and you're like, okay, I know what his high school resume is, and I know what he did in like one half. There's some of those games when I was watching in college where I'm like, oh my God, like this guy looks unstoppable, and then he looks like a complete mess. And then these smaller guards, you're like, I don't know where this is going. And then an increase in usage volume shots, he actually becomes way more efficient. So you're like, okay, so now we have a couple things here on top of the collection of guards who might all be backups. But there's like a lot of sifting through the decisions. And so when the Jaren Jackson Jr. thing becomes available, like I was like, of course they did this. Of course they did this because they know. And look, sure, I wish he rebounded more and fouled less. I wish he wasn't 50 plus million a year. But I know how special he is and how much of a nightmare he is as a matchup. And I also think the creativity of like the stuff they could do with him at center and then playing him with Kessler, depending on how they want to roll some of those lineups out there, they are in a market that is not a destination, which is its own topic that I'd love to get to, but they are in control of the acquisition. And that's what I think this deal was all about. And is he a top seven guy? No. Is he even a top two? Like he's not thought of as a top 10 guy right now. But when you start waiting around for like the player that doesn't have any flaws, then you're going to be waiting forever unless you have it all figured out ahead of time and you're one of three major markets. So I know what you're saying is like, where's the grade on the rebuild? I just love that there now feels like, okay, we'll see what the pick here is in 26, and like, what are our three best guys going to look like? And clearly, we haven't even talked about Lowry because of what's going on with the substitutions and not playing and everything. It is going into next year of feeling like, all right, there's an identity of like who the main guys are with this team. And I love the Jaren Jackson thing, even as expensive as it is. And who knows if he's hurt, then I'll regret saying that, and they'll regret trading for him.
But even you bring up Lowry, everybody's trying to trade him every single
Yeah.
offseason. And for a front office to realize, I mean, are we supposed to have zero good players on this team? Is that the direction that this is supposed to go? Keeping good players ends up being a win once you make this trade, and now you have different things to do around it.
It's another great point, and it's another thing that I'll go back like almost 20 years now, is that when the Celtics were lean after Doc comes in 04 and they're not great, it's like, okay, well, you have to trade Paul Pierce to go full rebuild here. And Danny would be like, I want to add to Paul Pierce. Paul Pierce is awesome. I don't want to trade Paul Pierce. Not to say that Utah wouldn't trade Lowry, but I think you brought up a great point in that the bad teams, the second you have somebody good, you're supposed to just give them away to all the other teams. And clearly, the pricing in Utah with Austin as well here, like the prices are high and good for them. The prices should be high on a player I think maybe 2 years ago when he first comes on the scene, you're like, oh my God, like this guy's incredible. Like what happened in Chicago, what happened in Cleveland, like even if there were a little burst of it, it's this steady, like almost all-star level play from Markkinen. But they weren't so concerned with the rebuild because we really are so annoying about these like structures and the timeline conversation of rebuilding teams. It's like, oh, okay, so now we're kind of rebuilding, even if we want to get into a semantics debate about it, we're rebuilding or whatever. It's like, all right, all your players be like 18 or 19. And it's like, yeah, but what about our 23-year-old that's really good? It's like, no, you can't have him. He's not on the same timeline. Like what? Not on the same timeline as like guys that may be in the G League in 2 years. So I'm not swearing because it's a Utah podcast, but I, I, you know, what I think is the best thing about this front office and their ownership, and I am, I sat next to Ryan for 2 games during that homestand, and you can't help but be blown away by the sincerity and then how impressive he is. And I have a relationship with Will Hardy, not that we're planning on a summer vacation together. So there is definitely some inherent bias that I will admit to here because I just like so many of the people with this organization. But they are exactly what you would want in the face of all the lack of patience decisions that we see in sports. It's not even the NBA. Like I love that they're like, the amount of time that goes by that's actually pretty insignificant, but in the moment you lose sight of like you start making these decisions that don't really make any sense. Because it's like, hey, how come we're not going to do this? Or this is taking too long, or this guy's too good, or this guy isn't good enough, and all this different stuff. So I just think that they are the epitome of patience in an impatient world.
What stands out when you watch Will Hardy coaching this team? Because I think it has to lend to the watchability factor of the Jazz. When you see him those 2 games, Will's throwing up stuff that is incredible.
Yeah, I think I think my favorite thing about him is that generally he's going into it outmanned. And then when you talk to other coaches, they're like, God, he's so good. Like other teams point out like the stacked deck that's going up against him every night, which I'm sure is like it's great to get paid. It's great to be an NBA head coach. It's great to be way ahead of schedule in a profession where guys that young don't usually get those opportunities. But getting your ass kicked every night now for a while, I'm sure is really tough. And I think the part that I found most impressive being right up next to him for those couple games is how hard, we can get into the dynamic of like a generational thing of like, why do players have to tell you that you're allowed to coach them? But that's what it is. You know, if you don't want to worry about people's feelings and the dynamic and how people are different and which buttons to push with people that you can't push with others, then get into a different profession. So I was even surprised a few times. And again, this is because of the seat that I had. So it wasn't like he was telling me any of this stuff. I'm just watching it. He was on his guys for a team that's been losing games in a way where I was like, whoa, like that's pretty pointed. Or like he's going at one of his best guys here. And what I realized, what I learned after those 2 days is that his guys want him to coach them like that. And that's hard to do. Normally it's like a younger guy and like to start tuning you out. I think all these coaches get tuned out eventually. This is kind of the way this sport works. So yeah, other coaches are always impressed with how hard the guys play. How he's had to utilize a million different lineups, it feels like, depending on who your number one option is going to be for 5 minute stretches, knowing that some guys are just way more comfortable ISOing, get out of the way, versus some of the creative ways that they get Lowry involved and, not just making him feel like it's 6'10" or 7 feet tall that he's going to like bring the ball up the court and all that kind of different stuff. So there's an on-court stuff that the other teams get, but having that, and I don't feel like I'm giving away anything here, but just seeing the conversation during those 2 nights of like, hey, this guy's going up against, I think at the time it was still like the Clippers were rolling and he's going into it being like, I expect to win this game. Not that any of these guys ever like think they're going to lose or like a couple bounces, couple threes go our way. We can win this basketball game. But he he has to be somebody that the team really respects for a losing team to still be coached that hard, which is, I think, what every coach at their core would hope from their team. So that's the thing that jumps out the most.
The alignment, I mean, and you spoke to this earlier, the alignment from ownership to front office to head coach is lockstep. That really helps and enables him to coach the way that he does it.
Yeah, I think other owners would go, hey, let's just change the coach, and instead he's got Zanuck, Danny Ainge, and Austin Ainge probably going. That would be, there's other owners that would make it harder on the front office, especially a new owner. Okay. Like I've talked about it, I've written about it, where there was another group that I was talking to that was like a minority partner in a team and they wanted to get involved. And I was like, if you do this, like I'm going to give you, I wrote out like a timeline of every new owner of the last 20 years the huge mistake they made within the first 12, 18 months on the job. Like they cannot help themselves. Like, hey, I finally own a team, as any of us would ever dream of being able to pull that off. And like you grow up with it and you think it can't be that much of a difference between me and these front office guys. And look, I think most people would tell you that ultimately the owner is the GM, but there's probably enough respect, equity from age in Utah, you would think, with Ryan, where it's like, hey, Ryan, I think you might be wrong about this. But I don't see Ryan as a meddler, because he isn't. He No one's ever said anything about that to me at all. Like you need an ownership that, you can sit there and I'm not even talking about Ryan right now, but like you can envision the guy like has his TED talk and he's getting out there with the earpiece and he's all fired up. He's like, this is how I'm going to do it. This is how I'm going to do it. And then that guy comes in with his billions to the NBA world and he just thinks he's going to do the exact same thing. And it's like, you can, like, none of that's really going to matter here. Like, a lot of this is how lucky do we get the year we have lottery picks, to be honest with you. But that's a very short interview, which wouldn't be all that impressive with an owner. But that's unfortunately kind of what dictates who's good and who isn't.
Jazz are going to see the Nuggets tonight. When you look at the West, I mean, Denver is really impressive. They have the best player in the world with Jokic. But are they going to be healthy? I sometimes just count on them not being healthy at the end of it, but they're still a pretty damn good team. What is the Western Conference heading into this playoff run?
It's really all over the place. Like I love to see at least like 6 weeks of continuity from a team goes in the regular season, so that I feel like you have a better sense of who they are. Like there's been some Knicks matchups against the Pistons where I go, like we can talk about the Knicks. Knicks could win 60 games, and I just don't think they can beat Detroit with the way they match up against them. And then they beat San Antonio, the hottest team in the league, an undefeated February. And it was funny because then I was watching it, and I try not to play the results, although it's really hard to ignore it at times. As you go, okay, so now they beat San Antonio, so now you like the Knicks again. If you basically wrote them off after the last Detroit loss, which was again another Detroit loss, but there was something to the continuity of the Knicks. Like the only argument that they seem to have right now is DOR and Sohan, which is a good spot to be in because, first of all, it shouldn't be an argument, and it wasn't an argument in that game against San Antonio. So the reason I say all that is that, like, I think we know what Houston looks like now with the Reed Shepard minutes where he's clearly Ime is given in. It's like, okay, he's going to be the guard. And he's playing over 30 minutes a game more often in February than he has at any other point in the season. Um, so there's something there that I like, even if I haven't liked their closing offense very much, right? OKC, it seems to not matter. They didn't even play SGA in the overtime win against Denver, and Jalen Williams still isn't playing. Mitchell's missed a ton of games. Caruso just kind of came back recently, so he did play. He made some great defensive plays in that one. So it's like OKC isn't even necessarily fully formed. Minnesota feels fully formed. I'm going to go see him in the Clippers. They beat the Clippers, who've done a great job on the margins with some of these later picks. Um, but I don't know. Like I'm like, are they going to win the West? Like that seems hard to predict, even if we feel like there's some continuity to them. So that brings me to Denver. All right. So Denver, Gordon hasn't played in forever. Watson hasn't played recently, which may be one of the most remarkable NBA Player of the Week awards in the history of me ever watching the game. If you had ever told me at any point Peyton Watson is going to win NBA Player of the Week, I'd be like, what happened to the rest of the players? Like, is there, and he's been,
Is there
by
a
the way,
shortage?
like, yeah, like a bunch of guys volunteered for something, and he was like, "I'll run game." Um, I know this sounds like it's a nasty Peyton Watson commentary, but it really has way more to do with like a skill that he wasn't ever allowed to show. And then it was like, oh, so he's just going to be working dudes on the ball 30 feet away from the hoop. Like, oh my God. So he hasn't been playing, right? And I know the Gordon baseline stuff is like super important for what they want to do with Jokic, because if Gordon's hitting threes, although I think they're from more specific areas as opposed to like somebody's going to be coming off of curls, full speed, catch and shoot stuff, it just kind of opens up everything they want to do. But Denver, I did this morning, so I don't know when this comes out. So I taped this Monday because I was watching both Denver games really closely. The Friday game, OKC's, if you're not watching that game, what are you doing?
And the
And then, of course,
Wolves.
against, right, Wolves. Like, again, I went to go see Ant live, and I still seem to have this like slight problem in Minnesota. And that's only through the lens of can they win the whole thing and not have it be a surprise to you? So, how about this for Denver? They're 4-8 in their last 12. They have 2 wins against teams that are 500 or better as of today, their records since January 7th. It's Boston both times. January 7th on Boston, and then more recently against Boston. When Boston was ending up a long stretch, kind of brutal. They lost by 20 points. So that's 2 wins now. We're almost 2 months, and it's only 2 wins against teams 500. So if you look at their home record, they're 16 and 12, which is unheard of for Denver. And I think the most alarming thing that keeps coming up with Jokic or without Jokic, in the clutch, they have a net rating of 27. Their last 3 years, they were first in the NBA, third in the NBA, first in the NBA, which makes sense because Jokic is going to get you an awesome look. They're going to be good enough defensively. They're going to be fantastic on offense. They'll figure it out. There's always some clutch stuff. Like you can present me with any number. If you give me a long enough time, I could probably find a way to pick it apart. But there is no way in the world the Nuggets should be 27th in net rating with the best player in the world on their team. And so that has to be corrected. I don't even know that it's necessarily like, hey, what are we doing wrong? What do we not like? Are we just having a brutal stretch of shooting? Because there's some times where I'll see a clutch number for a team where I go, oh, that number's really good, but I actually don't like you. That's fine. Like I think we should still be allowed to do some of that stuff. So Denver was my pick to win the West, man. And I don't know how I make that argument after 2 months of this. And you could talk about, again, lack of continuity, Jokic being out for such a long stretch, thinking they get Gordon back. They don't get him back. I think it was a nice reminder of what Murray is capable of doing. And just like back to that Lakers series when they won the whole thing, and you go like, do you realize how nasty this guy can be sometimes? And so we got to see some of that. We got to see some of the depth that Malone never seemed to really buy into. So there's enough there. The Cam Johnson minutes this weekend were brutal, but there's still enough there for me to go, okay, I'm not writing you off, but this has to, like, you can't finish the regular season with this same kind of run with or without Gordon and have me think that you can beat OKC. Like it just, even with OKC taking a step back from the 24-1 pace and going like, what's the Jalen Williams situation going to be? That was a night at their place. Granted, it was overtime, but to lose that one with no SGA playing, they chose not to play him. That's just kind of one of those losses that feels like it's more than one loss.
I was reading Schumann, and he brought up that they had not won 2 straight games since January. And that was very concerning for this stage of the season where you're playing teams who have different incentives at the end. Not that I bet you could look through their schedule and see how tough it is, but that being a pretty glaring issue to look at.
Look, I'll tell you though, the schedule hasn't really, up until the last little stretch here, yeah, I guess it has been a little tougher here because it's like Clippers right into OKC, which was another loss. So they have hit some of these teams, but then there was this other stretch in January where they were winning all these games, but that was out without Jokic. But other than the Charlotte and LA games in here, but like, it's funny, even the year they won the whole thing, if I go back to the standings, right? They were a 53 win 1 seed. So that's pretty low. They were 19 and 22 on the road. So it's a below 500 team on the road, and it's a 53 win 1 seed, which again is lower historically. So even as they were going into the playoffs that year, there wasn't like some foregone conclusion. That's just such a strange year. This was almost like the 2007 AP rankings in college football, which almost none of your audience is going to remember, but it was like my first year really covering it, and it was just absurd. And like Boston College was number 2 at one point in the country in football. Memphis was a 2 seed, which I think they have a banner for because they're so proud of it. They were a 2 seed with 51 wins. And then Sacramento was the 3 seed at 48 wins. All right. Sacramento. This is not even 3 years ago in real time on a calendar. The Sacramento Kings were a 3 seed in the NBA. So why am I bringing up all this stuff? Probably because it's a podcast and there's no hard out. But if you look at Denver this year, they're 16 and 12 at home. You want to keep crying about injuries. The Lakers are 17 and 12. The Golden State Warriors are 19 and 12 at home. So clutch, dumpy resume here, and not even close to being the team they have always been at home, even when they were bad on the road, winning a championship 3 years ago.
People care about college football here, so give the audience a little credit for 2007 AP poll. I get it was before Utah went undefeated, but still.
That's right. Utah did go undefeated. Bama wasn't super interested. No, I'm just kidding. That was I worked with a Bama guy. He's like, we didn't care about that game. Like, you didn't care? It seemed pretty competitive. Seemed pretty competitive, that one. Like, oh, Bama, we play for national championships. Like, you guys, Saban just got there a
It's
year
the
ago.
Sugar Bowl.
Yeah. Like,
Pretty
try.
important. Pretty important.
Well, they were incredible back-to-back Florida, Alabama SEC title games. So I could understand the disappointment after, but it was just a little, that's the part of, the non-SEC part of me that's like, yeah, that's annoying. Like every time you lose,
You
but
didn't care.
didn't care. It'd be awesome. I'd love to have that. Like anything that happens to me, let's go. I didn't care that day.
He's Ryen Russillo of the Ryen Russillo Show. Ryan, thank you so much for joining Roundball Roundup on
Yeah,
UtahJazz.com.
thanks so much for having me. Can't wait to be back.